He's a tall, tall man.
What does it all mean?
This is where the archaeology has been found.
Oh, hi, how are you? Look at that.
I need a planter.
A
Shrine to a belly button.
This is a rock with salt?
He digs for clues in his dusty.
Look at that. No one gets into this place. No one. Nice. Whoa, don't take me too far. Now that's naked archaeology.
Where's archaeology? Where's archaeology? Where's archaeology?
I'm standing on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Behind me, the Dome of the Rock. A holy place for the Muslims that's standing on the Temple Mount, a platform where once stood the house of God, the Temple of Solomon. And it stood there for 500 years, was destroyed, rebuilt, and stood for another 500 years, one of the wonders of the world before the Romans destroyed it some 2,000 years ago. It is said that it will be rebuilt and usher in the end of days and the new era of human history. But how will it be rebuilt when we don't know what it looked like? After being delivered from slavery in Egypt, the Jewish people wandered in the wilderness and prayed in a tent, the Tabernacle of Moses, taking the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the Ten Commandments, with them wherever they went. Finally, King Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem on the holy ground of Mount Moriah, believed to be the place where God formed Adam from the dust. The temple had to be huge to accommodate all the pilgrims who would come from far and wide, bringing their animals to sacrifice, to show their devotion to God. It took thousands of laborers working for 7 years to complete the building of the temple in 957 BCE, and the Jewish people finally had a place to gather and pray. But the temple was also a place for everyone who believed in one God. As it is written, "My temple will be a house of prayer for all nations." But in 586 BCE, the Babylonians destroyed it. The second temple was built on the same site as the first, and centuries later, it was greatly expanded by Herod. Then, in 70 CE, the Roman siege of Jerusalem began. The temple was destroyed, the city burned, and 1 million people killed. In all the time since, a third temple has never been built. Now a quiz. What do these words mean? If you build it, he will come. Sure, it's a line from the movie Field of Dreams, but some people believe that the temple must be rebuilt so that the Messiah will come. Some of them are building models of Solomon's temple. What makes these real people as single-minded as the fictional man who built the baseball field? And how can it be done if nothing of the temple can be found? I'm on my way to meet these model builders to try and find out. First, a typical Texas ranch. This is Nolan Armstrong, right over here from Georgia, and Joe Good from Texas. He's agreeing, the horse is agreeing. You'd never think that these guys over here, they're rebuilding the temple. I'm not kidding. Okay, so could you tell me, Joe, how did you get into this?
It was something that I just knew I was called to do. I was compelled to do it. It was like I couldn't stop. For a long time, we thought, well, we'll build a model of the temple, and that would be it. And then we realized that the model that we were going to build was in computer graphics.
Joe and Nolan have been working together, designing their computer model for 12 years. How close are you getting? I mean, this is another 12 years or what?
It could be another 50 years that we continue learning. But I feel that we are very close.
Why does it take so long to make a model of Solomon's temple? What are Joe and Nolan concerned about getting right? In a word, everything. Because this is holy architecture, designed to be the connection between the earthly and the divine. So every detail has to be right. The temple was made up of ever-increasing areas of sanctity, and you had to purify the body before the soul. Through ritual bathing, you know, cleanliness is next to godliness. Everyone went to an immersion bath, a mikveh, before entering the outer court to pray. And if you were offering a sacrifice, you would then enter the inner court, the Azara. Beyond this was the holy place for the priests, and beyond that, the most sacred place of all, the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. Only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. So where do Joe and Nolan start? Like all good detectives, they look through the evidence. There are descriptions of the temple in the Bible. There are passages in the Mishnah, in the Talmud. And there is Josephus, who wrote in the 1st century CE and who witnessed the burning of the Second Temple. Comparing these ancient texts with archaeology while designing their computer model is a mammoth job. But Joe and Nolan aren't the first model builders, and they can gather valuable knowledge from those who came before. So we're off to Jerusalem. To figure out what was there in the past, we need access to the Temple Mount. But today, access is not granted. Luckily, over 100 years ago, this model was made of the current structures.
This was done by Conrad Schick. He worked with the Palestine Exploration Fund.
This is in the 1870s, right?
In 1870s. I understand that this model was done in 1879.
And he's even got these little doorways, and he's providing in the doorways, access to these underground cisterns. You're using the cisterns to actually figure out the geometry, the architecture.
That's right. And we can't go into the cisterns today. The Muslims will not allow it.
This is invaluable.
We could not do what we do today if it were not for this.
One of the mysteries concerning the temple is its size. How many people could gather here at one time? Joe and Nolan have looked at the conventional sources, but they've taken a unique approach.
There was a toilet that was right here under the ground.
That was an important discovery for you.
Very important.
Why?
Because it gave us the ability to understand the public entering in and the process that they went through in order to enter into the inner courtyards. All of a sudden, things took on shape. We were able to see them, and then Nolan was able to put them into computer, and we can draw them.
There's a clue in the text. Pilgrims had to cleanse themselves before entering the temple. This model shows the toilets, mikvahs, and cisterns where the water was kept. Seeing their size tells us how many pilgrims could be accommodated. The life of the temple can now be imagined.
There is a grid of conduits located right here.
I got it, plumbing.
Plumbing.
You're actually finding function. You're finding out thousands and thousands of pilgrims.
That's right.
Where did they go? What did they do?
That's it. That's exactly it.
And underneath the model is even more evidence.
This is the actual topography?
That's right.
This is amazing.
Now, here's where the toilets would have been located.
But why
These
are
were the
they-
two that we talked about above. And the men would go to probably the larger, because more men would be attending the Temple Mount, and the smaller was probably for the women.
He didn't fool around, Sheik. Why would he do this for display? Nobody would ever climb underneath the table.
He did it for students of the future.
He did it for Nolan and you.
Even though Joe and Nolan aren't allowed to examine the Temple Mount, now that we've seen what's underneath this model, we want to see what's under the area where the temple once stood. In the 10th century BCE, King Solomon built the first temple where the Israelites could pray. It drew millions of pilgrims, was destroyed, rebuilt, and Jesus wept as he foretold it would be destroyed again. It was, and ever since, there have been prayers of hope for its rebuilding. But some people are doing more than hoping. They're studying texts, comparing it to archaeology, and making models, striving for complete accuracy, because this is holy architecture. I'm with Joe Good and Nolan Armstrong, who have spent years examining all the evidence so as to create a computer model of Solomon's temple. For Joe and Nolan to take measurements and walk in the steps of the pilgrims, we've come to Jerusalem to get as close as possible to where Solomon's temple actually stood.
You're rebuilding the temple. How does it work with you guys?
It works very well in that Joe's strength is in the text. And he and I work together on what he finds. Then
I see. If he thinks he's found something theoretically, you try to construct it, it just doesn't fit.
If you can't build it,
Then we
it
keep
wasn't
working.
real.
If you build it, they will come.
Exactly.
Now, when you're standing here, you know, I mean, there's the Western Wall, people are praying. You're standing over here. Do you see the wall that I see, or do you see something else?
I see a lot more. I mean, I see this wall, but when I see it as it was. And then I see the walls that are beyond it, going inside the various tunnels, the
He sees
inner chambers.
invisible walls. I love it.
But it's there.
So let's go for it. They're rebuilding the temple. People forget that this temple functioned for literally 1,000 years. We're not talking 100 years.
It was the greatest structure of the ancient world.
So Nolan, when you're standing over here, what do you see?
This is actually no longer an underground vault. This is a building which is above the roadway below us. A Roman reconstruction off the foundations that were originally there.
I see they destroyed it and they rebuilt it.
That's right.
Joe Nolan can examine stones, patterns, and building style as they reconstruct what was here before. You actually use these kinds of architecture to recreate it in computer graphics.
Absolutely. We go ahead and we use this as basically a pattern with which to build from, which also has the detail that gives us column heights, column diameters, loads to the millimeter.
Originally, we were building the model physically.
Physically?
Yes, we had a model that we were building in my office.
Oh no, you wouldn't want to smash that every once in a while.
Well, that's what we had to do, because every time that we learned something new, we had to change what we had before. And that's where we switched to the computer.
To you, surely it's more than historical research.
Has nothing to do with history. It has to do with the future.
Although the temple was destroyed, there are buildings that were affected by the fire and are still standing today. We're heading to one now. Numbers and figures are one thing, but standing here within a 4-story building that stood at the time of the temple, we can begin to feel its grandeur. These are stones that can speak to us.
Let me show you something simple. Take your hand and go here, right up here. You see smell this. Smell it.
Oh, look at this. Can you see that? This is actual ash.
That's right.
Soot.
And you can still smell it.
This is a 2,000-year-old fire.
That's right. You just step back in time.
It's actually very sad. It's preserving the moment of destruction of the holiest building on
Now, when you
on
read,
Earth.
from this point, when you read Josephus, and you read about the burning of this building, you read about the destruction of Jerusalem, it'll always be different because you've smelled the ash. Me, I can hear the sounds of the city, 2,000 years ago. And
Destruction.
the destruction, yeah.
But the good
But can you hear the sound of the rebuilding?
That's
that we
the
can-
part now.
In the Bible, Ezekiel says, "Describe the temple to the house of Israel, and let them measure the pattern, write it down in their sight, so that they may keep all its ordinances." Joe and Nolan are trying to do just that. But halfway around the world in Suffolk, England, there's another incredible model. We're off to see it.
There we are.
Oh my God. I'm going on a trip around the world, meeting model builders dedicated to rebuilding the Temple of Solomon. The naked archaeologist will go anywhere for a story. 2,000 years ago, the Second Temple was destroyed. Some believe if it's rebuilt, the Messiah will come. So it's imperative to get the details of the model right.
It says in Ezekiel 43 to build a model, and that's what we're doing here in the virtual reality model.
Modern technology, ancient archaeology, and biblical
text.
prophecy, and you're putting it all together.
That's right.
As Joe and Nolan compare evidence to put finishing touches on their computer model, they're not the only ones obsessed with getting it right. So I'm off to England to meet Alec Gerard. At the age most people have retired, you wouldn't believe what he's doing.
There we are.
Oh my God, look at this thing. I was expecting a little model on a
Yeah,
table.
yeah, most people do.
This is breathtaking. Oh, well, you got little people.
Yes, they're all doing something.
Thousands of them.
Yeah,
You baked them in the oven.
yeah, and then I paint them.
How long have you been working on this?
30 years.
30 years.
To begin with, I worked in the church, but I felt I was getting nowhere at all. So I did this. People come from everywhere to see it. With this, I don't have to tell them, I show them. And you can show people a lot better than you can tell them.
And do you go to Jerusalem and try to, like...
No, I've never been.
You've never been to Jerusalem?
No.
But people from Jerusalem have been here. Scholars from all over the world come to Alec's garage in Suffolk to study this model.
This looks like the Western Wall.
Yes, that's the Western Wall.
Ground level today is up here somewhere.
Yes, about there, yes.
I was just standing here, you know, a few days ago.
Yeah.
Don't you want to go to Jerusalem?
No, I don't want to go.
No?
I'll go to the New Jerusalem.
You'll go to New Jerusalem, I see. Well, look at this. Oh, my God, you look in here. You can see all the way down into the temple area. Wow. These are pilgrims, right?
Yeah, this would be the entrance for the general public. And they would go in that gate and come out that gate.
Those steps still exist, don't
Yes,
they?
they're still there. And they're all irregular shapes and distances. And that's done deliberately so they can't rush up to the house of God.
I want to introduce you guys to each other.
Hello.
How to do?
And what do you think of this?
It's the most awesome model I've ever seen in the temple.
Isn't it?
The work that you put into this is unbelievable. It's really dramatic.
You mentioned there could have been 800,000 people
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
I mean, they've got to go to the loo.
Yes.
Where are your loos? What? Oh, wow. Is that latrines?
Yeah, there would be
It looks
washing.
like washing.
There was a passageway underneath from this building where the priest would...
That sounds like what you told me.
Yes, but ours is different.
How is yours different?
We believe that it was underneath this building.
You think this thing was underneath here. You know, it's amazing. You know, Georgia, Texas, England, in 2 seconds you're talking about technicalities of the latrines of the Jerusalem temple. But what you're trying to understand is the function
That's right.
of the
Yes,
temple.
That's right.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Of the house of God.
Yes.
All this detail makes me want to be the size of one of Alec's figures so I can feel what it was like to be in the temple. That's what Joe and Nolan have been trying to discover, and you know what? They figured it out. From Texas to Jerusalem to England, I'm on a trip around the world because I want to see the amazing models people are building of the Temple of Solomon. Joe, Nolan, and Alec are model builders who've spent decades studying the ancient texts and archaeology to try and learn exactly what the temple looked like and how it functioned. We're in London, heading for the Palestine Exploration Fund's library. The PF has been around since 1865. As Joe and Nolan continue to research, they can look at hand-drawn maps of the Temple Mount which were made 140 years ago. We've also come to meet renowned author David Jacobson because he's written the definitive book on what's under the Temple Mount, and he has a surprise for us.
He's doing quite a bit from memory, Josephus.
Jacobson doubts Josephus's account of the dimensions of the Second Temple.
Because he has the whole perimeter, I think, is six star days, which is far too small. So I then checked up Josephus's account of distances in other contexts. He's wrong everywhere he goes.
According to Jacobson, the dimensions of the temple given by Josephus are smaller than they should be. The more we learn about the temple, the bigger it gets. Which makes sense. After all, there would have been 3 million pilgrims there during the holidays. Armed with this new information, Joe and Nolan go back to the drawing board and recalibrate their model. Inside Nolan's laptop, a whole world is about to take shape.
Wow. That's so beautiful. You literally can get around it. Wow, this is very exciting. I mean, you make the temple come alive, the Holy Temple of Jerusalem.
Joe and Nolan's computer model is now the most accurate model on Earth of Solomon's temple.
And you ascend from here to another level of sanctity, a higher level of restriction.
I guess I would meditate, prepare myself, purify
Absolutely.
myself.
If he had an animal to sacrifice, the pilgrim would now enter through this gate to the Azara.
You're talking about a gateway which is 20 feet wide by 40 feet tall.
That's huge.
This is larger than an average house.
So what do I see when I'm in that courtyard?
The altar, you could drive a semi tractor trailer truck on top of it.
Unload your cows
Yes.
and bulls. So they're butchering animals in there.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
People singing, chanting.
Smoke ascending from the altar.
Wow, it's a busy place.
It's chaos if nobody knows what they're doing.
And how many steps lead up from this courtyard, the Azara, to the temple itself, so to speak?
There are 12 steps.
12 steps.
And they're
So
designed
12-step program.
it would be appropriate.
Now, you're in the sanctuary, but you're not in the Holy of Holies.
Absolutely not. You can't even see it. The curtain, it represented all of creation.
Wow.
And so what is behind all of creation?
God,
God.
you're in the holy place. And just beyond the holy place is the Holy of Holies.
Just beyond those two veils.
It would be like overwhelming.
It had to be.
Do you have a representation of what it looked like when you snuck past those double curtains?
Curtains? No, I don't.
Ah, you haven't built a Holy of Holies.
I'm not up to that.
So while creating the most accurate model ever built of the Holy Temple, Joe and Nolan are aware that some things are best left in mystery. Perhaps their model will one day serve as the blueprint for the future, the house of God, whose rebuilding is prophesied in the Bible.
He's a tall, tall